Like in a fever nightmare, these pilots were trying to control their aircraft, but it just wouldn't do what they asked from it. Stay tuned, the weather was partially cloudy on the evening of the 6th of February 1996, when a group of German and Polish passengers were getting ready to fly back home after a lovely stay in the Dominican Republic. There was also some thunder rumbling down to the south, with AUKUS rain showers coming and going over Gregorio León International Airport, but that was not what these passengers were paying attention to, as the evening grew later and later. Instead, they were all waiting for news about when they were going to actually be able to depart. The Boeing 767, which had originally been assigned for this flight, had experienced some kind of technical issue and had therefore been grounded until some spare porch could arrive. There was no way of knowing how long that would take, meaning that it obviously couldn't be used for this flight, so the charter company, Alas Nacionales, were working hard to try and find a suitable replacement. Now at the time, Alas were working together with a Turkish company called Birgenair, and when they were contacted, it turned out that they had another aircraft, a Boeing 757, which could potentially be used instead. The only issue was that this aircraft had been sitting on the ground for quite a while, 20 days, according to the final report, so it needed to be prepared properly with catering, cleaning, etc. before it could be taken back into service. This would cause a further delay, which meant that the original crew who had been scheduled to perform this flight would no longer be able to do it due to duty hours. So a completely new crew would have to be called in. This also took a bit of time, since most of this new crew would have to be called in from their scheduled off days, but at around 22:15, the 3 pilots and most of the 10 cabin crew had finally reported to the airport. The pilots started to immediately look through their flight plans and briefing data to see what they had ahead of them. The plan was that they would initially fly up to Gander in Canada and then fly onward to Berlin-Schenfeld and finally to Frankfurt in Germany, because this would be a very long duty. A third pilot had also been assigned to act as a relief pilot, and together they now looked at the weather and the knots for the plant tree legs. Like I mentioned before, it was raining on and off in Puerto Plan, and there was also some thunderstorm activity down to the south, but that shouldn't affect their northerly route. The weather for the rest of the flight looked okay, and so did the flight plan high-level charge, and no thumbs. So they soon decided on the fuel and walked over to the cabin crew to start briefing them about what to expect. Now it was likely in this briefing that they were informed that one of the cabin crew had not arrived yet and would be coming in about 1 hour's time. There wasn't much that they could do about that, so the pilots just continued to brief the crew about what they were expecting in terms of turbulence, weather, and special requests. And after that, they proceeded. Gather out to the aircraft, which had now been brought forward from the storage parking stand. It was a gleaming-looking 12-years-old boy, 75700, equipped with 2 RB211, 535 E4 engines, which had been leased to Birgenair 3 years earlier in 1993. Like I mentioned before, it had been sitting on the ground for the last few weeks, and during that time, an engine test had been carried out in the form of a ground run which had been fully successful, but after that test had been completed, there was no indication in the tech log that the covers protecting the engines and the PTO tubes had been fitted, nor if they had been installed in the first place. So what does that mean? Then, well, if an aircraft is going to be staying on the ground for more than a few hours without supervision, it's a good idea to try and cover any openings or parts of the aircraft where dust, insects, birds, and other wildlife could potentially get in the engines, are therefore normally covered. But another system which is hugely sensitive to any kind of blockage is something known as the ptotic system. You see, it's super important for us pilots to always know what our indicated airspeed is, as well as our altitude, of course. And the most reliable way that we have to keep track of these parameters is by measuring certain pressure differences down on the ground. The static air pressure is around 13 hectopascals. But as we climb, that pressure will decrease in an almost linear way, at least for the first couple of kilometers. This means that if we can continuously measure that pressure outside of the aircraft, we can, with the help of a quite simple mathematical model, calculate how high up we are at any given time. Now, there are some corrections. Thank you. Do subscribe. See you soon. Part 2.